Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're peeling back the layers on a really key part of the Philippine justice system.
Yeah, we're looking at Rule 115 of the revised rules on criminal procedure.
Right, and this is basically the guide that spells out the fundamental rights for anyone accused of a crime. It pulls straight from the Constitution's Bill of Rights,
Yeah,
making sure there's procedural due process.
exactly. And for this, we're leaning on some solid academic commentary, Riano's 2025 edition specifically, and also looking at some really important Supreme Court decisions.
hmm
These cases show how these rights actually work, how they get interpreted in real-life courtrooms.
So our mission here is to unpack some of the most critical rights under Rule 115, see how they play out. Okay, let's get into it.
Okay, well, the absolute foundation, sometimes called the cornerstone, is the right to be presumed innocent.
Yes.
Which means essentially you're innocent until the prosecution proves you're guilty beyond reasonable doubt.
And that just flips everything, doesn't it? The entire burden, all of it, is on the state,
Right.
the accused person. They don't have to prove a thing about their innocence.
Precisely. And you see this in Supreme Court cases. Like, People v. Vilas basically said a weak defense doesn't matter if the prosecution's case is also weak. It just doesn't meet the standard.
Okay.
And even more pointedly, maybe, People v. Sabi. That case showed if there's real doubt about the evidence itself, like a proven reason someone might fabricate charges, that creates reasonable doubt. Acquittal follows.
Wow.
It really shows the system trying hard to avoid convicting innocent people.
That's powerful. Okay, so moving through the process.
Yeah.
What about the right to counsel and the right not to incriminate yourself?
Two huge ones. So the right to counsel means you get a lawyer, one you choose, or one the court gives you at basically every important step.
Every step, like from the very beginning.
Yeah, the Supreme Court in People v. Cerzo Jr. was quite clear. This kicks in right from the custodial investigation stage.
Before you even get to court.
Exactly. And it's interesting, there's even talk now legislatively about protecting this right, even when someone's talking to the media, outside the formal court process.
Shows these things are still evolving. Okay, and the privilege against self-incrimination. Don't have to testify against yourself.
Correct. You can't be forced. But here's a really crucial distinction the sources make.
Okay.
This primarily protects testimonial evidence, things you're forced to say or write. It generally doesn't cover purely physical evidence. Think fingerprints, DNA samples, handwriting examples, if getting them doesn't involve forcing you to make a statement about them.
Okay. So forcing a confession, protected. Taking fingerprints, maybe not, depending on how it's done.
That's the line drawn in cases like People v. Asen and People v. Torres went even further, showing an accused person can't even be forced to take the stand for a co-accused. They have like a whole different level of protection.
Really isolates that right to the individual. Okay, what about keeping the trial itself fair and, well, timely?
That brings us to the right to a speedy, impartial, and public trial. Means the trial shouldn't have unreasonable delays, the judge must be unbiased, and it should generally be open to the public.
There's the Speedy Trial Act for that, right?
Right.
But you often have to kind of raise your hand and say, hey, this is taking too long.
Generally, yes, you need to invoke the right. And a big case, Kagang v. Sanigan Bayon, made this important distinction between speedy trial delays in court and speedy disposition, which covers delays in any part of the process, even before trial.
Okay.
And it uses this balancing test to decide if a delay is unreasonable. Looks at how long the delay was, why it happened, if you asserted your right, and if it actually harmed your case. It's the court trying to deal with, system backlogs.
Practical approach. And then confrontation.
The right to confrontation. Riano calls it the greatest legal engine for truth. It's your right to cross-examine the witnesses who testify against you. Face your accusers, essentially. Absolutely. But applying it can get tricky. You see this tension in cases like Kim Lang versus Cañaveras. One case said the right could be waived if the lawyer just didn't act, but another case set aside a similar waiver because there weren't any obvious delaying tactics involved.
So sometimes the court prioritizes the fundamental right over sticking rigidly to procedure.
Exactly. When fairness seems to demand it, it shows that balancing act again.
Okay. And finally, if things don't go your way, the right to appeal.
Yes, it's a statutory right. You can ask a higher court to review the conviction, but, and this is a big but, the sources really stress you have to follow the rules and deadlines perfectly.
No room for error there.
Very little.
Right.
The Republic VCA case is a stark reminder. Missing a deadline, even if it was your lawyer's fault, That can mean you lose the right to appeal entirely. Procedure is key at that stage.
Wow. Okay, so wrapping this up, what's the big picture here?
Yeah.
Rule 115 isn't just legal jargon.
Not at all. It's really the operating manual for constitutional due process in Philippine criminal law. These rights we've talked about, presumption of innocence, right to counsel, confrontation, protection from self-incrimination, they're all there to try and level the playing field.
Between the power of the state and the individual accused.
Precisely. And the examples we discussed from Riano, from the Supreme Court, they show these aren't just dusty rules, they're living principles, constantly being interpreted, applied to new facts, new challenges.
So thinking about all this, what really stands out to you, the listener? How does understanding these specific rights maybe change how you view the whole criminal justice process?
Yeah, and maybe consider this. We live in an age of digital evidence, instant online opinions. How do these fundamental principles in Rule 115 keep adapting? How can they continue to protect the accused against, new forms of state power or even public pressure? Something to think about.